I never planned on dying in an elevator with my boss, but given his expression, I wasn't sure if that would be better or worse than surviving with him. The man could freeze boiling water with a single look, and right now, I was the unlucky intern stuck in his icebox. The first shudder came at 7:48 a.m., halfway between the 27th and 28th floors. The lights flickered. The floor tilted just enough to send my coffee splashing across my shirt, and then silence. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy, oppressive kind that presses into your chest. "Don't touch anything," he said. His voice clipped and commanding, as if I were about to start dismantling the elevator with my bare hands. Right? Because my first instinct in a crisis is always to rewire electrical panels. I muttered. His eyes cut to me sharp, blue, and unblinking. I shut up. The man was Mason Hale, CEO, ruthless negotiator, a legend in the New York corporate scene for turning failing companies into gold mines and for making junior staff cry in the bathroom. I'd been working under him for 2 months, or maybe it was more accurate to say, I'd been surviving under him for 2 months. Now here we were, trapped in a steel box. "Maintenance should be here soon," Mason said, his gaze fixed on the elevator's LED screen as if sheer willpower could make it change. I decided not to mention that the building's maintenance team was notoriously slow. Instead, I leaned back against the wall and tried not to think about how close we were standing. The elevator was small, and Mason wasn't exactly a man you could ignore. His presence filled the space, tall, broad-shouldered, the faint scent of expensive cologne making the air heavier. 15 minutes passed, then 20. My phone had no signal. Mason's had no signal. The emergency intercom produced nothing but static. That was when I noticed his right hand. It was flexing slowly, the tendons shifting under his skin. Nervous energy. Mason Hale, the man who'd once calmly told a board member he was replaceable in front of 30 people, was nervous. "You okay?" I asked before I could stop myself. He glanced at me, and for the first time, his expression wasn't made of granite. "I don't like enclosed spaces," he admitted. His voice was quieter, almost reluctant. I blinked. "You mean you're claustrophobic?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Suddenly, I saw him differently, not as the untouchable, cold executive, but as a man standing in a box with his heart rate creeping higher. We slid down to sit on the floor, back against opposite walls. The air was warmer now, and I could feel my shirt clinging to my skin. "I guess this isn't how you start your mornings," I said. "Not exactly," Mason replied. Then, after a pause, "What about you? Always this talkative." I smiled faintly. "Only when I think I might die." That earned me the smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, but close. By the 1-hour mark, the silence had shifted. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was tentative, almost curious. Mason asked me about my life before the company, my college, why I'd chosen marketing. I expected him to listen in that distracted, predatory way he did in meetings, waiting for weaknesses to exploit. Instead, he listened like he wanted to know. And then, without meaning to, I told him about my dad. About how he'd stopped talking to me after I came out. About the 3 Christmases I'd spent alone. When I finally looked up, Mason's eyes weren't cold anymore. They were steady, grounding. "I'm sorry," he said simply. It startled me more than the elevator jerking earlier. I didn't think Mason Hale said sorry to anyone. "You don't need to be," I said, shrugging. "Maybe not," he replied. "But I am." By the 2-hour mark, the air between us had thinned into something fragile but charged. I caught myself staring at the faint stubble on his jaw, the way his tie had loosened, the subtle shift of his shoulders every time he breathed. At some point, we were sitting closer without realizing it. Our knees brushed. Neither of us moved away. "I'm not as bad as you think," Mason murmured, eyes on the floor. "I don't think you're bad," I said before I could think better of it. That made him look at me, really look. The elevator hummed faintly, the sound of the cables above stirring, but my pulse was louder. "Mason," I started. And then the elevator jolted. Lights flared. We were moving again. The doors opened on the 30th floor. We stepped out, but something had shifted. He didn't walk away immediately. Instead, Mason touched my wrist lightly, but deliberately. "Dinner. Tonight," he said. It wasn't a question. My heart did something reckless. "Okay." That dinner turned into a conversation that lasted until midnight. And the next day, there was coffee on my desk with a note in his neat handwriting. For the talkative intern who made being stuck not so bad. Weeks later, when we finally kissed, it wasn't in an elevator. But it felt just as breathless, just as close. Mason Hale wasn't the man I thought he was. And maybe I wasn't just surviving at this job anymore. I was living. The first snow of December dusted the streets like powdered sugar. I was walking fast, hands shoved deep in my pockets, replaying Mason's text in my mind for the 100th time. "Meet me at the park. 10 p.m. We hadn't spoken much at work lately. Not because things had gone wrong, quite the opposite. The problem was, every time we were in the same room, it felt like we were both trying to keep a lid on something too big to name. When I reached the park, he was already there, standing beneath a halo of lamplight. His breath came in white clouds, his hands bare despite the cold. "You're late," he said, but there was no bite in it. "Only by 3 minutes," I replied, my voice softer than I meant. We stood there for a moment, the quiet settling between us. And then Mason did something I'd never seen him do in all the time I'd known him. He hesitated. "I'm not good at this," he said finally. "The relationship thing. I've spent most of my life thinking it was safer not to let anyone in." My chest tightened. "And now?" He looked straight at me, eyes steady. "Now there's you." It wasn't a confession shouted across a crowded street or whispered in the dark. It was just honest. And somehow that made it more powerful. "You make it sound like a risk," I said, my lips tugging into a smile I couldn't control. "It is," Mason murmured, "but it's one I'm willing to take." And then he stepped forward, closing the space between us. His hand came up to my neck, warm against my skin, grounding me in the cold night air. The scent of his cologne was faint but familiar now, like something I'd already started to associate with safety. Our foreheads touched first, a pause that felt like the city itself was holding its breath. "Tell me if you don't want this," he said, his voice low. "I want this," I whispered back. The kiss was slow, deliberate, not the rush of heat I'd imagined, but something deeper, steadier, like we were building a bridge brick by brick between two lonely places. When we finally pulled back, Mason didn't look away. His thumb brushed my jaw, and the corner of his mouth lifted. "You know," he said, "I used to think being trapped in that elevator was the worst way to start a morning. And now," I asked, "now I think it might have been the best thing that ever happened to me." We walked back together through the snow, his arm brushing mine. The city around us blurred into soft lights and quiet streets. It wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning, the kind you don't see coming, until one day you realize you're exactly where you're meant to be. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.